if you have like a public facing API, or if you have like high load and you want to restrict what kind of operations can be run, this is like a typical problem with GraphQL, because it publishes the entire schema, so people can use whatever they want. This is a way to like restrict what runtime characteristics you actually want with your API. So we already have an API limit deployed called depth limits. So that is a very important feature, which in which like you can say how many like how much nesting you can actually have in a GraphQL query. So similar to that, we are actually going to talk about this new thing called node limit. And it's basically a way for you to restrict the total number of nodes. And what is a node? A node is basically a field, an object field, which has a selection set. So as an example, if you have like a users table, then you can probably query ID and name. So there is one node in this query, right? And similarly, if you look at this, the right side here, you can see that it's slightly more complicated. But in short, this, and this are object fields with selection sets. So this operation has 3 nodes. So now we'll see how you can restrict that and what it means to like restrict an API with a node limit. So I hope you can also see my terminal. I'm just going to increase the font size here. Okay. I'm sure if it increased. Oops. Is the terminal visible? Oops.
It is.
Okay. I don't know how to say yes on this window. It's a new OS. I'm trying. So anyway, so I have here a Chinook dataset, which has tracked few tables, created few relationships, usual stuff, and it has permissions on few tables and few roles with those permissions. So it has public role and user role. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to run a query like this with, say, a public role, right? And if you notice, this query actually has like three nodes, artist, albums, and categories, and it actually goes through. And what we want to do is restrict the number of nodes, right? So I'm going to now change. I'm going to apply this node limit, and that is defined in this in my metadata file. And if you look at the bottom here, I have this key called API limits, and it has this subfield called node limit. And there are 2 types of limits that you can set. One is at a global level, which means that all the roles okay, so I think I should first talk about the per role setting here. So node limit you can define per role. For example, you can say a user role has node limit of 2. You can also add any other role here, give it custom limits. And finally, you can then give a global node limit, which means if you haven't defined anything explicitly in this per role setting, then the global limit will be picked for that particular role, right? So I'm going to apply this metadata, import node limits. And if you see here, my node limit again was by default, I wanted 1 node to be executed, and for user role, I wanted like two nodes max to be executed. So let me try and do that here. So this has 2 nodes, and I can see operation node limit exceeded. And if I change this to user, I can see that the user role goes through. Now let me, in this user role itself, let me go and like ask for 1 more role. So I'm going to say album 1, alias this, and here I'm going to say album 2, and request for other IDs again. So this has 3 nodes now, and if I run this, I get node limit exceeded. The depth of this is still 2. If you notice, it's just artists and albums, but since we have more number of fields, like more number of nodes to be more specific, we get this node limit exceeded.